73 Yards is perhaps this first episode of the second Russell T Davies era where you can argue that the new approach is for the first time seen uncluttered by any of the old approach. How do I even begin to describe this episode? Today talking is going to be myself, Neo from Australia, along with Ingiga from England and Miraz from the USA. Miraz, do you want to have a crack at describing this episode?
I would say this is Nightmare Who. This is... Well, let me give a plot attempt, because usually that's your job, and you're taking a break this week. Ruby and the Doctor land in a scenic... they land by a scenic Welsh cliffside, right next to a collection of strings and mystical tokens, which they refer to as a fairy circle, but I'm pretty sure a fairy circle is a mushroom circle. But whatever, I'm not in charge of making the English speak properly. They accidentally break it, and Ruby also happens to read some of the letters and notes that are left in the fairy circle, including one that refers to Mad Jack. Instantly, the Doctor is gone. She looks for him thinking that he's peeing, but unfortunately he's not. He's just out of the episode. It's not Doctor Who anymore, it's the Ruby show. So Ruby then immediately afterwards notices a mysterious elderly woman in the distance. The first of three mysterious elderly women in this episode. She approaches her to try and see if she knows what happened to the Doctor, but no matter how far she goes, she never gets any closer to the elderly woman. Oh, actually, I suppose the first of four mysterious elderly women. Anyway, she...
You're already struggling, I can tell.
She then heads back. Yeah, there's a lot of dream logic in this episode, and that is what I love most about it. This really does feels like a nightmare I've had. Like I've had dozens of nightmares like this. I think everybody has. It's very... I like it a lot, is what I'm trying to get at. So, she starts heading along the trail, trying to avoid the mysterious elderly woman, when she encounters the second mysterious elderly woman of the episode, Susan Twist, who is hiking. Ruby seems to recognize her for the first time, which is interesting. She asks Susan Twist to go talk to the follower, and when she does, suddenly Susan looks back over at Ruby and runs away. And we don't see her again until next week. Ruby then heads into town. I apologize, I forget the name of the town. It's a quaint Welsh village, last seen in the Torchwood episode Countryside. This is what they do the rest of the year. She goes into the tavern, or I guess an inn rather, because they have rooms. Where probably my favorite scene in the episode happens, where she meets all these amusing Welsh townies, and they have an improv session where they decide we're gonna freak out this stupid English bint. I'm gonna take a break from the description now because I'm having trouble, like you said, keeping up.
I think it's from that point on the episode, once it's burned through that fake horror story premise, it then starts to keep going, and that's what gives it this dreamlike feeling, because it keeps changing and morphing. The narrative kind of wanders into completely unforeseen, strange realms. Like, it's so fixated on pursuing this question of the woman that is Semper Distans from Ruby, that it doesn't actually bother keeping its horror story genre anymore. It becomes this strange, tonally clashing other thing, but it nonetheless follows all the way through this strange dream logic that Ruby has entered. And I think the result is just this really fascinating episode that feels, I mean, obviously unique is kind of a trite way to describe it at this point. But I would say there is something I think quite brilliant about it, because it's not a horror story, but it turns into this messy biography of a life. And that is something that is much more in line with RTD, I think.
Yeah.
I think RTD, we see this across his career in like Cucumber, It's a Sin, like vibes of this. Him like tracking a life through all its strange, funny ups and downs, rather than trying to do something that's specifically restricted to one genre or even makes sense as one genre. It's this very messy, explosive other thing.
Did Neo die?
Oh no, this episode. This was what I wanted. When Russell T Davies was announced he was coming back, and I was, heralding, and it'll be different this time. It's not gonna be like it was. And then it started, and it kind of was like it was. Not always in a bad way. Like,
yeah, it was 3 episodes, present, past, future, and then how does the rest of it go? There's the Moffat episode in the middle that's the best one, and then a disappointing finale.
Yeah. But
don't forget lots of cringe. That's the most big common element.
I love the 60th, but it's the Russell T Davies era was not as new as I expected. This new era as what we were getting. This episode is this is what I thought we were going to get and what I wanted to get, where this isn't something maybe it's the first episode. There's bits of the giggle, but this is maybe the first episode where I can't see this in the Moffat era. I can't see this in the first Russell era. This feels like a new thing. This feels like a thing that wouldn't have been in the show before. And I love that. That's what I wanted. And it's not even that I love that it exists, just on principle. I really, really like this episode. I find it really engaging. I thought it was really affecting. I love the biography stuff, and I just love the logic of it. This feels like a Doctor Who's done this before, but not in this big, loud way. It's done this in novels. It's done this in Torchwood and stuff. But to do this completely, like Russell talks a big talk about we're doing magic and goblins now and we don't need to explain it. The show already kind of could do that, but we're formalizing it. That's fine. That's great. I love that. But this is the first time where, I think the reason a lot of people bounced off this episode was because you can't unpack this with the rules that the show has previously given you. This isn't trying to, the time loop works in this way, and if we unpack that, they disrupted the time loop. It's not that sort of thing. It's a dream. Like Mira said, it's a dream. It's a Twin Peaksy dream world. It's all about symbolism and resonances rather than about, this happened and this changed that timeline. It's not Primer. It's a totally different show, and I really, really, really love that.
Yeah. This is so far my favorite episode of the RTD2 era. It's probably my favorite RTD episode period since at least Midnight. And I mean, it's new episode smell still, so I can't be exactly objective, but I would say this is one of my all-time favorites from him.
The thing is, the way it's written, it has snags in it that don't come undone. Because the whole underlying logic of, what is the woman, how is she here, what's happening to Ruby, why is it happening, that is not given to you. That is something that is left, frustratingly and brilliantly,
it's always distant from you.
Still tied up, basically. The opposite of untied, still tied. Yeah, and in doing that, it leaves this weird tied up ball with the viewer, in the viewer's head, that, nonetheless, no matter how much you think about it, it will not give you an answer. It will not be solved in that way.
Yeah. And
stuff like that is the kind of stuff that lingers with you and haunts you because it's not answered. And, like reality and life, ultimately, it's got this enigma at the heart of it. And it's gesturing at this much stranger, larger, freakier, underlying, maybe malevolent, maybe not kind of reality that you can't get a grip on. And it just feels so huge compared to something that has nice little laid out logic and rules and laws, which can feel so small once you see them and understand them. And a story where this means that, and it's very clear this is an allegory for that, and this is connected to that. And the kind of thing that I guess Moffat would write ultimately, where everything is kind of connected together and it's beautiful, but you also kind of get what's going on.
Yes.
This is something that is, wilder altogether. And I guess it's that willingness to be messy that kind of, when RTD really switches it on, that's what takes it out of the box and kind of towards the stratosphere.
Now that I think about it, the fact that the woman is so far away that
we can't see her features.
So we are kind of invited, as we're looking at the screen itself, to sort of project whatever we want, whatever our minds can put there. And that's also pretty fitting with how I've seen a lot of people interpreting this episode. I've seen queer readings of it. I've seen readings of it about abandonment issues. about borderline personality disorder. I've seen an interesting read on that. Aging anxiety, all sorts of really interesting. It's because I guess it being a dreamlike episode, it makes sense that lots of people would have different interpretations of it, because it really feels like it's digging in. You can feel it grabbing at something, and everybody has something else, there to fill in.
And you bring up the image of the woman looking out of focus and you can't really see her. And that is an important note, because the fact that this is a piece of screen storytelling, like it's on TV, that's important. Because if this was in prose, it would not have the same effect at all. The fact that it is using the image of that woman just so far, so small in the frame, and keeping her that small, never enlarging her, and keeping all the people who go to talk to the woman really small in frame as well, like creating that sense of distance and not being able to quite make out what's going on through the camera is just so vital to this weird, visceral, unsettling impact it has. And that's why I think so much of it feels so magical. I feel like this is, I don't know if this is the episode I would say is the most second entertainment of RTD2 so far, but it does feel the most magical to me in terms of actually doing something with TV that feels, uncanny and out of the ordinary.
Yeah. So, should we resume with trying to chart the path this episode takes? Yeah, the next thing that comes up is she's told a story about Mad Jack. And again, we're given so few details that it's quite easy to fill in whatever you want about Mad Jack. Because the first time I watched the episode, I was mentally connecting him with the what they were talking about earlier with the subjugation of Wales by the English.
Yeah.
So I was thinking Mad Jack, he must be some lord from back in the day. And then the second time I watched the episode, and I'd gotten away from that thinking, I realized that the details they give are so sparse because they're possibly being made up on the spot. He could be anyone. He could be anything. He could be, a serial killer or Captain Jack Harkness. It could be anything. It could be nothing. And I love the ambiguity of that, because that ambiguity is going to be at the heart of everything that continues to happen with the story going forward.
I love rewatching that scene in the pub, because even though on first watch it's done in this tension building way and it's quite effective, and once you obviously know that they're making it all up and they're just fucking with Ruby, obviously it doesn't have that scare factor anymore, but it's so funny to rewatch when you know that they're making it up. Because the interplay between the different people in the pub, the way that they add new bits to the story like that really snappily, it's just magical to watch, and the performance will do a great job. It's just really immensely funny, and just the way that the direction kind of carries through the tone but also amps it up a bit with the Dutch angles, kind of, it's knowingly silly. It's just it is brilliant. I love that whole sequence, just masterfully executed.
Reminds me of my favorite scene from The Fires of Pompeii, when the augurs and when the seers are all having like a prophecy duel about the Doctor and Donna at Caecilius' house. Remember?
Yeah.
Man from Gallifrey, daughter of London. There's something on your back.
Yeah. It's like the Wales episode, which I really, really love that they're doing, because it is it's literally a Welsh show. It's made in Wales. It has this huge 20-year history of being made in Wales. Basically, I really like that in this first, ostensibly new viewers maybe are going to see this, guys. Disney America. This is new. I love that we have such a loud, this is Wales. Wales is cool. Let's talk about Wales a lot. It's not just in the background. We're actually talking about Wales, Welsh villain, Welsh heroes, Welsh. I really like that we've got a big, loud Welsh showing off the Welsh landscape. Actually, film. I think that's a really cool idea. You
can feel RTD kind of going out of his way to add and kind of bring out the magic of, I guess, Wales as a geographic landscape as well. So the whole monologue about, the castles as torture centres, and the history of this place actually being full of violence and kind of power relations and dynamics and stuff like that. But also even just the, not just the lovely, beautiful shots of the waves against the cliff tops, but the way that even the layout of the cliffs and that kind of random tree off in the distance almost seem to form part of the magic spell in the episode. The way that the woman is perfectly aligned with that little kind of leaning tree as Ruby looks at her, and and the way that kind of the ghost of that layout kind of follows Ruby almost in the 73 yards. It just feels like that. The magic feels tied to that landscape in a way that's not super laid on thick, but it's kind of there if you kind of pay attention.
I love the stuff with the paying on the phone and them all hamming up. What would we know about that? I loved all that stuff. I loved also in those scenes, especially Murray Gold doing those old like horror sustained strings sorts of thing. I love the episode is all working together to be like, this is the horror episode, this is the Wicker Man type of thing. And then, like we said, I just love how messy and strange it gets, where it like shifts into a drama for a while. Then we get this political thing, which all like the pitches we'd seen beforehand, I think we were expecting political commentary. We were expecting a years and years or turn left sort of thing. And I really don't think there was any, I really don't think that was political commentary, that section at all. I think that was operating much more in a, Roger Ap Gwilliam was like a vague monster threat more than anything else, I think. And I get why that disappointed people. It kind of disappointed me because I think some RTD big loud political commentary could have been really fun and interesting there. I don't think that was quite how it was operating.
Yeah, well, it did remind me of Years and Years a little bit, but only in that what I always thought worked best with Years and Years wasn't as much the in-depth political commentary. It was the sense of losing touch with the rest of the world, with how everything seems to get worse and worse, all in leaps and strides.
Yeah.
And Roger Ap Gwilliam sort of gives us that figure, but divorced from any material sense of political reality. Like with the woman, he's someone you can project all your fears onto.
Yeah.
His one single policy issue is that he wants to fire nuclear weapons.
And I think what clicked it together on rewatch, actually, just before we go on, is that, like you say, because William is this thing being projected onto, that's kind of what Ruby's doing as well. I mean, she is literally projecting this idea of Mad Jack onto him, because he said, they called me Mad Jack back in the day. And I think that kind of informs why, I guess, as a character, he's so slight, because we're almost kind of seeing him from Ruby's point of view. Like, she's kind of heard from the Doctor that he's this nuclear threat that has to be destroyed, and kind of that's why, like, the nuclear aspect of him is the only one that's really, like, there. Like, if there was lots of stuff about how all his different kind of ideologies and positions and whatever, capitalist politics and this and that, and his perspective on taxation and whatnot, that would almost feel like it's getting away from Ruby's kind of interpretation of him and more into RTD's interpretation of politics and this and that. And fun that would totally be, but I do think it might risk diluting, I guess, what the script is trying to do. So I get it more now, kind of looking at it a second time.
Yeah. I love that first scene where she sees him on the TV while she's at the bar. His eyes look so creepy when he says, they called me Mad Jack. Again, in almost the exact same tone that Jack Harkness referred to himself as the face of Bull.
Yeah. They called me.
I don't mean to keep going back there. It's a guy from Wales named Jack. That's probably nothing.
I mean, you mentioned Torchwood, but like this, I mean, Torchwood had small worlds in the first season, right? An episode about the magic fairies and spiriting away children. Yeah, this could almost, it could be one of those PJ Hammond episodes that's just really random and self-contained in the middle of a season. Like if Chip had kept running the show. The
audios do a Welsh folk horror story like every year now as well. It's like a Torchwood tradition, so it was really cool to get. Yeah, I really love that folk horror stuff. I think it's so cool to get a big one on the TV.
Yeah.
And speaking of spin-offs, I mean, the Doctor said the war between the land and the sea at the start of this episode, and he was referring to, I guess, the Welsh coastline, kind of the contrast of the sea and the cliffs top. So rather than like sea devils crawling out and like menacing like a Glen Gatwig, it seems to be more of a folk spirit kind of thing. So if they do end up making a spin-off with those words attached to it somehow, it could be more interesting than it seemed at first. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be like the sea devils invading Hookland.
Or it could just be countryside every week.
Oh, please.
I mean, I'd take that. There's lots of countryside.
Yeah.
That reminds me, the unit, I usually hate Unit and Kate, but there was a kind of cool thing in that Unit scene, which I liked. I like that scene when she talks about our soldiers are blah, blah, blah. We have psychic dampeners, blah, blah, blah technology, and we all wear necklaces of silver and salt now. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. That's
a really cool post-giggle kind of thing to do with Unit.
It seems like something they should have been doing all along, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. I do really like Unit's part in the episode. That scene.
Yeah.
I guess we're skipping ahead a little bit because we skipped over the part where her family abandons her too.
Again.
I'm sure we'll get to that.
I love that we get UNIT, you know, the Doctor Who thing that's not the TARDIS. It's one of the most, you know, integral parts of the lore, and we know they take care of companions. They even bring that up.
Yeah.
And then the first sudden shock we get is when she says that all of the stuff with the Doctor disappearing and her being lost in Wales and then coming home and her family abandoning her happened a year ago rather than just like a couple days ago, which is what it seems like on first watch. So immediately you're given like a shock that unmoors you from you no longer feel like you're making sense of the episode because a year has passed between scenes without any visible change. And then we're told, oh, and also, you know, UNIT turns on Ruby, and now she's completely cut off from the rest of it. Feels like she's cut off from the entire universe, really.
Yeah, there's a brilliance in bringing in UNIT, the reassuring presence that can often kind of make things a bit boring because they shoot the monsters and get rid of them and stuff. Bringing them in just to have them be useless and get rid of them, and have them make the situation even worse for Ruby. Because the one thing that seemed like that they could save her actually cannot. Like, nothing can stop this. Something is so fundamentally wrong with the universe or the timeline with Ruby at this point that no like narrative logic of Doctor Who can possibly get in and like resolve it at this point. And like you say, with that year time skip inserted in there, I guess it's the point in the episode at which you realise that this whatever this reality is, it can't be reconcilable with what we understand as the direction of the story as it was going, like, up till now. Like, probably it's a point at which you can probably intuit that things will be reset or unwritten eventually at the end of the episode. But it's the point at which it's the point at which the rules, I guess, of this season are transgressed so utterly that there isn't any going back.
The Carla thing we skipped, this is one of those unfortunate little... I think part of this is the short episode order of the season being 8 or 9 episodes. Like, you know, we've had lots of episodes now... Well, we've had lots of episodes of the Doctor crying and or running away. We've had lots of episodes of the Doctor fucking stuff up by stepping on something when he shouldn't have. We've had lots of episodes of Carla being kind of really cruel to her daughter. I don't think it's anyone's fault exactly that these things are repeating. It's just we don't have many stories, so it stands out. But yeah, the Carla thing, that was awful. That was, devastating. It's the fact that she came back and was like, fuck off, eventually, like, hurt.
Yeah.
That hurt so much more than with the weird shot of her just driving away. Wow.
Yeah, if Carla had been as established as Jackie had been by this point in, like, Series 1, 2005, I think it would have been even more, like, impactful. But instead we get in, like, that glib bit in Space Babies where Carla's there, but she doesn't really have anything to do. So I think, and yeah, like you say, it's awkward that we already had a dark Carla sequence in Church on Ruby Road, like, in the first episode, so it feels a bit repeated. You know, so rather than like some huge variance. But, you know, that whole thing, I mean, the Carla stuff is the point at which it becomes clear that they aren't just running away squared randomly from Ruby. It is actually like hatred, like repulsion.
Yeah.
True, like absolute, like unfathomable, just loathing for Ruby, which is, you know, much more interesting. And I guess it's kind of one of the enduring, I guess, enigmas of the episode is what is it that makes them treat Ruby like that? Like, what is it? Particularly because lots of people have interpreted that as what does the woman say to convince them to think like this, but clearly it seems to be something a bit deeper than that, something a bit less literal. You know, it's because it seems to me like something is so, you know, fundamentally wrong, I guess, with the universe, with reality. Like, Ruby is the anomaly, or she is what's wrong, she is what's abominable, and I guess like it seems to me like the characters can only translate that in terms of hating Ruby and finding her disgusting and wrong. So I think that's a really fun, non-literal kind of thing that slides in there.
It's the part of the episode that got me the most the first time I watched it. It's watching it, I thought, you know, I think probably every queer person has had that exact same, this literal nightmare that somehow someone's going to tell them something, or they're going to find something out about you. You know, they're going to find out the real you. And then everyone you know, even your family, your mother, going to turn on you and be repulsed by you. It's really profoundly upsetting.
Yeah, it's uncomfortably real. You know, that it's just so close to reality, but it also feels very specific to Ruby in that way, because she's the one who is constantly wondering about, you know, why was she left on the church. So it's like that has now been extrapolated into this whole bigger thing where like everyone is now, or like her fear about what might have been done to her is now being done by everyone. Of course, Carla brings that up as well. Even your real mother didn't want you, which is like ice cold, like out of pocket much. Jeez.
I love this. Just skip forward into the resolution when it's kind of the most Doctor Who-y bit of the episode when she uses her. I guess I don't know if it's called an app anymore after Roger's comment. When she uses that thing on her phone to calculate the distance, so she can line up the woman with the follower with Roger Ap Gwilliam. That's the most like. It's a very Doctor Who kind of. I'm kind of hacking the weird conceit of this episode to kind of win. I'm weaponizing the premise of the episode to like save the day. That was a really interesting because depending on how you read that, it's really interesting to think about. Like if you're reading that as an abandonment issue, she's kind of projecting her. She's kind of like weaponized. I've been abandoned. I want him to abandon. You know, or if you it's rejection. I think it's. Do you find that beat interesting to read, or do you find it just kind of a cheap, well, it's just kind of a plot thing to get him out of the way? It didn't really make sense. How did you guys take the kind of climax there?
Well, in terms of plot, I did really... It feels like one last sort of parting, oh yeah, this is Doctor Who, isn't it? There should be a Doctor Who bit at the end. And it's a very Doctor Who resolution, but then the episode continues on afterwards. The whole dream scenario continues. And my favorite part along those lines is in the scene right before that, his campaign manager, or whoever that guy is, points out that Roger still says hi and shakes hands with everybody he meets up on the stage, just to justify that he's going to approach this creepy lady. But in terms of like reading it as like a metaphor or an allegory or anything like that, I haven't really. I have not personally found an interesting angle to attack it from, but I do like. I like that. In general, the idea is she's found a way to turn the worst thing that's happened in her life into saving the world, essentially. And that is at the heart of many of the great, modern, many of the great Doctor Who companions have something along those lines in them. There's some injury, there's some wound that they're able to protect others using, if that follows.
Yeah, and also at the climax, watching it kind of feels like Ruby is doing magic. Because, at the start of the episode, I guess she's been cursed or something by some kind of magic spell or whatever this is, and that magic has sort of haunted her, tormented her, but now she's actually using it, embracing it, and kind of becoming the magician, like doing this strange thing that no one around her understands. They're all pointing guns at her, like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah,
and she's almost a bit like, how Amy Pond at her wedding, she starts ranting about like a raggedy man, and everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he risks huge public embarrassment from doing this, but it actually works. It summons the Doctor back into reality. It feels a bit along those lines. Ruby having her moment to kind of take that strange kind of inscrutable magic and using it to her own ends. And I think the struggle that we kind of have with kind of trying to apply reading to the woman in that moment, like the readings from elsewhere in the episode about like mental illness or queerness and that, and trying to put it there, I think the awkwardness of it, I think, is part of, like I mentioned earlier, the episode has snags in the writing that don't come undone, and I think it's because the woman refuses to be read in any one specific way, like one limited, strict way, that I kind of makes it leave that kind of that still wrapped ball like in your consciousness. I think that because ultimately the woman is the woman, right? She is there because she is there. She is 73 yards away because she is, and it's just the facts of that get carried through to their conclusions, which is Ruby can use it for these purposes, and it also does this and means this and reflects this about her. Yeah. So it's not just one thing. It's this big, beautiful, messy, explosive thing, which I think is a lot more interesting, and it's the kind of thing that leaves you thinking about it a lot longer in the end.
Yeah.
Do you remember in the giggle when everyone started speaking their mind because they shout and they type and they cancel and all that? We had a politician who was going like, "Why should I care about you?" and laughing because he was now being honest to like the crowd. I know this is narrowing it down a little bit, but I like this idea of Roger. The funny thing with Roger is he's not even, obviously he's abusing Marty in some way. He's not quite openly bigoted on screen. Like, his main thing just seems to be, I would really like to fire some nuclear missiles. Like, that's his one policy. But and anyway, is
there? I could see there's some kind of the way he when he finds out that what Marty's name is, and he says, "A
boy's name." Yeah.
There's something weird. I feel like there could be some kind of queer reading there, but I don't know. I'm not English. I'm not.
That's another deliberately ambiguous hint thing, isn't it? Like you mentioned earlier, all these different aspects of him have those deliberate. You can project whatever you want onto them. There's just enough of a hint there for you to think, what's going on?
Yeah.
Anyway, the politicians. It's like it's a control of the population thing. You know, obviously this is what politics is. But I love this idea that however you read the woman with Ruby, whether it's fear of abandonment, or it's disgust or hatred, or there's something wrong with you, people rejecting you. I like kind of flipping that, it's making the politicians, making like the leaders abandon her and hate her and be disgusted by her and reject her by leaving in, you know, the same way that others. I love it's kind of a macro blowing up of like a social, it's like the flaw of her life, or it feels like a real maturity thing to me, that when you're younger, there's an issue in your life, and it depresses you and it makes you sad that people are rejecting you or hating you or abandoning you or whatever. But when you get older, you can realize, I can weaponize this. I can use this. Yes, it sucks that this is part of me, but I can use this to my advantage. But if people are going to abandon me, why can't I use that, you know, selectively? I think this kind of resonance is playing around there with, she's grown up enough to accept, and you know, that's kind of how the episode ends with her. I accept this part of myself. I can use this part of myself. And also this kind of thing where the politicians kind of abandon you in a way while they're, you know, sucking things out of you. But what if you could make them completely abandon you? What if they're already disgusted by you? Like in the Giga, we had that kind of beat about that. But what if they were so disgusted that they didn't even want to control you? They were just like, I need to get away from you disgusting plebs. So I liked a lot of the stuff kind of tinkling around in that scene. I found that really, it sparked my brain a bit.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it, yeah.
Just one more thing about nuclear missiles. I do think that may be, as much as we talk about that as kind of a vague thing, it's not like connected to any like particular bigotry or whatever. You know, there was this weird moment in British politics a while back where people were like trying to get Jeremy Corbyn to say he would totally press the nuclear button. Like that was a real thing, like happening on British television. So that is like a real bizarre neurosis that our politicians have, like this willingness to basically cause mass death. You know, like one of the like top kind of fixers in the Labour Party at the moment has talked about, he's fantasized publicly about pointing 40 nuclear warheads at cities. Like it's this really weird paraphilia, I think, that exists in our politics. Like RTD is definitely onto something real there.
Yeah, he does approach that during the interview, doesn't he? The way he frames it is he's Welsh, so he knows what it's like to be oppressed. The only answer to the question of English dominance over the Welsh people is nuclear weapons. And frankly, I understand that perfectly. But I can see where the neurosis comes from, being that Britain was the great and mighty empire, and they're diminished, and their failed former colony is one of the two major nuclear powers in the world and has been for the entirety of the history of nuclear weapons. Of course the British are going to feel the sense of grievance that he brings, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That I can, even though I don't really know English politics that well, I can see that coming through in his performance.
Yeah. I mentioned this earlier, Mirrors, but what's so great with the episode is it doesn't end at that Roger thing. The curse on Ruby keeps going for decades and decades and decades. And we like chart through her whole life in that kind of RTD biography episode type thing Gig mentioned. I think that's where the magic really kicks in, is that it's not much of a Doctor Who episode in the traditional sense, and then it kind of is in that climax we talked about, and then it breaks because it just keeps going on for a while after that. I love all that stuff. When she's an old woman and she's visiting the TARDIS, which is like the Wild Bill yonder, it's on the cliffside, and it's, you know, just become a weird little memento. People leave things by. Ruby's old. The nurse. It's like you know that meme of like there's a woman like taking away a older woman as the older woman's cheering away about something that the other woman doesn't really believe. It's I could make it snow once, you know. The nurse isn't really having it.
That's nice, Grandma.
Yeah. Or the nurse patiently trying to explain the light, and the light being something of it's not even that. That's the idea of voice activated stuff has been in movies forever, and of course Ruby would know about it. I love it. Feels very RTD and very real. all that kind of stuff. And then we get the kind of jump scary thing of the woman, the follower, finally encroaching close to Ruby.
I loved that. So good.
Fucking terrifying scene. Like I said, nightmare fucking Who.
Yeah.
It starts in horror. It starts in like the dreamlike sense of horror, and it fucking ends at sleep paralysis demon. Jesus Christ, that made me jump.
It's like the cuts to black as the lights go in and out, and the sound design goes like absolutely screeching at you, genuinely just like heart throbbing like panic every time I watch that. Very, very good. And also, I don't want to spoil this other thing, but it does feel connected to that one thing in Cucumber. If whoever knows, knows.
Yes, yeah, 100%. The way that's edited, yeah, totally.
Yes.
And I love the point of view shots of Ruby's hands. I love it. Just felt so uncanny, and to flip it around, I think it's a shame. How to make this not sound patronizing, because I'm not really trying to. I think it's a shame some people are having trouble connecting with the episode, because I think there's such joy to be found if you can open yourself up to the kind of dream logic it's working on. I think this is so just invigorating and powerful and awesome. I get that it's a totally different sphere, but that's kind of the fun of this, is that we're now like, if you only watch Doctor Who, this feels new, but the show is opening up and it's letting you in, and it's a new kind of storytelling you can get through the TV show now. I wish more people could kind of have the joy I got in that moment, which is, I know people can go, but that doesn't make sense because when, time, but it's not doing that. It's not being that show right now. It's a nightmare. I found that really affecting when she becomes the woman who kind of tortured her in a way. It's such a weird like self-acceptance thing, and and she's kind of giving advice to a younger self, and she's the person that never abandoned herself. And I really love. It's the kind of thing like, it's the kind of thing David Lynch would tell you to shut up and don't put it into words. It just in my brain, everything is clicking there. If I'm not, maybe I can't articulate it, but everything symbolically just kind of zip works for me there, and it makes sense for me there in my brain. And it just feels like a powerful kind of thing about accepting yourself and loss of life and life revert. I really love that.
Yeah. It's in Terry Pratchett once wrote about some images sort of transcend symbolism because the image itself is so powerful. It doesn't have to make perfect symbolic sense. The image itself justifies itself. And her becoming the woman and saving herself from the curse is in its own way that kind of thing. I'm
sure there are lots of Doctor Who fans who are very like Primer's that old sci-fi movie that's like extremely intricate, and nerds really love unpacking all the because it works. Like you can unpack all the timelines correctly or whatever. I think a lot of people, it's not like there's only the super nerdy, mathy Doctor Who viewers that can only I don't even think there's that many of them. There's totally tons of those, because Doctor Who is Doctor Who and Moffat Who is Moffat Who. Tons of these viewers get. Obviously, this sounds so patronizing. I'm not trying to be like this. Obviously, these viewers get metaphor. They get allegory. They understand this thing stands in for other thing. They get subtext. That's all fine. But I think the episode's going beyond that. It's not like a Moffat thing of this is standing in for something else. I think the leap this kind of episode is making is, well, it's your choice. It's not I think the prevailing reading emerging is that the old woman is like Ruby's abandonment issues, which is a great reading, but the episode isn't doing that as the allegory. The episode isn't doing that as the metaphor. That's a great one you can read into it, but this is more of an open, we never, like, Ruby says the line, everyone's abandoned me at the end, but that's one line of dialogue. You can totally take a different thing. It's not mapping onto, the episode isn't a puzzle. It's not like, here are the puzzle pieces and you put it together and you've unlocked the metaphor. Now you understand, you have media literacy, you've understood the episode. It's not doing that. And I think the fandom's going to try and squish it.
It's not heaven sent.
I think fans are going to try and squish it down into that, because that's so much more palatable and it's so much more in the mode of what Doctor Who has done before. But this isn't a Moffat-esque thing equals thing. This is there are resonances here you can read into, but there's not a clean map of thing equals thing. And that's the joy of it. And that's why it feels like something new. And so it
reminds me of Darren Morgan's episodes of The X-Files. It's about subjectivity. It's about the intrusion of subjective reality into what we consider to be an objective reality. And Doctor Who is that we always say, it's a show where anything could happen every week, and there's no canon except what's going on right this second. And here finally we have an episode that delivers on that promise.
Yeah.
And I have seen people including some people I would have expected to appreciate it, reacting very poorly to it.
You know, I think if the ending had had some bit that maybe you could picture Moff writing or something like that, where like there's a very clever explanation for why she's 73 yards away.
Yeah.
Like there's some bit of the plot that explains that perfectly, and it all makes sense. Brilliant. People would be like, 10 out of 10s, absolute.
I actually thought there was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, it is the kind of episode where you could do something a bit like that. And the fact that Artie ultimately doesn't kind of is just how he's doubling down is the thing. He doesn't give you explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought, because they were focusing on the cliffs at the end, I was thinking, what is like the water is 73 yards below or something? No, it's just nothing. It's just an image. It's image. It insists upon itself because it deserves to be there.
Like in the behind the scenes, RTD talked about like why he picked 73 yards, and it's just like, well, he basically measured how far a person needs to be away from you before they look. You can't really make them out anymore. So it was literally just the vibes. That's why he picked that distance, because he wanted to go for that exact vibe and put that in the episode. And I think maybe the fact that there is focus in the text on Ruby measuring the distance kind of maybe puts people on the wrong track almost, because they feel like they have to.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that number, then there must be a solution, an answer. It must be a puzzle. This must be a puzzle box. But at the same time,
it's 66.7 meters. That's almost 666.
Yeah. But at the same time, they're also dotting in little other things. Like, I love when Kate says, maybe landing the TARDIS perception filter on the fairy circle is what caused this and that. And that obviously leads nowhere, but that is another little suggestion in this whole massive, unconnected mess of suggestions that kind of ultimately frustrate you ever getting to a single truth.
That and the thing about the timeline is suspended along your event or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, unit talk for... They're just going to label this Ruby's World on the TARDIS wiki.
I love the fact that the Doctor is just gone in this episode.
Yes.
It's kind of like a dark mirror of Ruby stepping on the butterfly in Space Babies, isn't it? The Doctor steps out of the TARDIS and just ceases to exist. And the fact that I kind of love that the characters don't really seem to internalize or accept that he's gone, because Carla's still rabbiting on about, he's just in his shed. And old Ruby's still talking to the TARDIS like the Doctor's still there. Like, he's gone, bro. He's fucking ceased to exist. He broke the curse. He has been deleted from time and space. And there's something that's so much creepier and scarier about that versus him just like dying like in turn left. The fact that he could just be gone. It makes his existence feel very fragile in a way that it usually doesn't in the show. The Doctor feels like he's meant to be like a constant of this universe almost. So I guess it's because we've diverged into Ruby's world, like you put it, that he cannot exist anymore. He's just gone. And there's something really lonely and sad and chilling and sort of poignant and kind of sublime about him just being gone.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier. The episode this reminds me of, and I haven't seen a lot of these episodes, but I've seen a couple of them. Reminds me of back in the day when for whatever reason William Hartnell was just not going to be in an episode.
Yeah. So
the Doctor just essentially vanishes for a week, sometimes literally. It's like if Mission to the Unknown happened to somebody we know and care about on the show,
Or in other words, it's the connection to Celestial Toymaker, which links this whole era together. That's the Toymaker started this shit with a disembodied hand Doctor. Yes, it is rather taking that to its ultimate extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some people say, but it should have. What if the Doctor had run away in the TARDIS from Ruby? And it's like if he'd went and talked to the woman. But I feel like that it's one of those things that sounds clever when you read a fan saying it, but it really, I think that would be such a terrible idea for so many reasons.
That I do like that idea, but it would not have worked on screen.
It's him disappearing feels so much spookier.
Yeah, exactly. It's not needed to have the Doctor do the same thing everyone else is doing.
Yeah,
because the Doctor is kind of he's a special case too. All these humans in Ruby's life, they're one thing, and the Doctor is another thing. So for the Doctor to just be gone kind of it heightens the horror of everyone else kind of abandoning her, because it's we don't have a nice neat explanation for what happened to the Doctor.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the Doctor is almost like there's something magic about the Doctor, and it's because of that the reaction that he has to this spell is so different, and he ceases to exist or whatever. He just goes, and that just makes it's just more interesting this way. Don't try and flatten everything and make it all the same.
With the ending, which we brought up again, something I really liked with the 40-year time skip. And I don't want to just squish this into the abandonment issues thing, because I think it works in other ways as well. I just love how the woman shifts into kind of a comforting presence. Like, I've never been alone, and this is always, I think that's just, I really like, it's like a biography episode, so we're charting Ruby's life from nights. I don't mind the, I've seen people complain, oh, they didn't make it look like old Tennant in Last of the Time Lords, but I think the episode is going to age better for not doing any CGI stuff and not doing over-the-top prosthetics. Yes, you can laugh that she still looks kind of super young when she's 40, but I think that dreamlike episode, and it doesn't age, because you look at the old prosthetics in older New Who now, that they look really bad. And I think that was the right move, to just give her a week and say, this is a TV show, let's deal with it.
I like The Girl Who Waited, but...
That's all right, actually, yeah.
For the most part, there's some scenes where it starts to drip apart. But yeah, I think they do a little bit. There's a difference in her forehead. There's lines around her face. She does look a bit aged, but, you know, she moisturizes.
Yeah, I think the slight wrongness of the effect there, I think, adds something a bit intangible, because we should not be watching Ruby grow into her 40s on the show. That should not happen, right? She's supposed to be a Doctor's companion.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that she doesn't look like she ought to, almost. She looks like we can't fathom what Ruby would actually look like as she grows up. I think there's something right about that in its own weird way.
Mm-hmm. I found it very affecting how she embraces this, like, it's just, I think that's such a maturity thing. If she starts off terrified and aggrieved and so frustrated and lost with this aspect connected to herself that she dislikes, eventually as she gets older, she weaponizes it. And in the end, it kind of comforts her that this has been with me always. I think that's a really powerful kind of thing, however you want to read it, about like a journey of a life.
Yeah.
She also says, when she's at the TARDIS, kind of outside, sitting in the wheelchair, she also says that, I dare to hope. Like,
yeah.
I think I've thought about it, and maybe this is why the woman's here, because I have hope now, like, still. And it's like the fact that this strange anomaly is still attached to her means that maybe, I guess this uncanny, inexplicable reality, the strange magical logic that she's entered, still has some hold. Like, there is still some larger truth at work. There is still some meaning to all of this, like some point. And the fact that the woman hasn't disappeared yet means that meaning could still be coming. And of course it does in the end, when she I guess, dies or becomes a ghost or whatever it is, the truth, it all comes crashing in. So I guess it's the willingness to still, I guess, believe in that magic almost, that something could be coming, is how you go from this is horrible to this is a source of, like, comfort or hope or truth or something like that. This is reality, and I'm accepting it.
It's a dark compass.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so it is. On the whole thing of accepting the anomaly, that little montage where the song starts playing and we see Ruby's failed romantic relationships with the woman just there in the background every time. as it gets, like, the scenes get quite funny, even though the woman still looks exactly as creepy and wrong as she has in every other scene, and she's still that far away and she's still doing her thing, and they haven't changed the visual conventions of the woman at all. We're just getting these very funny scenes with her and kind of this kind of peppy soundtrack, this ironic soundtrack. I found that, especially on second watch, I found that brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's just a willingness to just completely crash the tones into each other, almost verging on, like, horror parody almost.
Yeah. Like
if someone's doing, like, some like YouTube short parody of, like, a horror movie monster in, like, a mundane situation. Except that kind of it's just done really straight-facedly almost, and it's just the willingness to do that as part of the wider story and carry it through. It just beautifully embodies how RTD, by clashing these different tones together, he explodes them into what feels like a truer representation of life and life's just tangled nature. Because it's not supposed to work like this. Like, TV storytelling is not meant to work like this. And that sense of the wrongness is exhilarating, in my opinion.
Was she doing actual sign language in the mysterious woman?
It's not like sign language per se, because I think in Unleashed, or one of the behind the scenes thing, the lady doing the actions, she talked about it, and basically her movement coach, it wasn't sign language, but basically he sort of gave her these, like, prompts, like these series of prompts to kind of respond to. So she's sort of gesturing, like the little phrases that she's kind of representing through her gestures.
Oh.
And they aren't specific ones that, like, reveal the secret of the episode or anything. They're actually kind of weirdly, like, not related, which I think is quite interesting. So there's stuff like, how could I ever repay you? Oh, yeah. Thank you for giving me that little thing. Like, really strange gestures that don't seem to connect to the episode. But I actually love them because the weirdly kind of melancholy, but kind of also warm and kind of, just the tone of those gestures and the fact that she's stuck on this loop doing them all the time. Just something about that really freaks me out. I just found that fantastic.
Yeah.
Just the strangest touch of emotion to the gestures, the slightest hint of them going on in this permanent loop in the background of these shots, just gives them this really just freaky vibe that I can't really explain.
It feels like, I don't know, it feels almost grandmotherly, but
Yeah.
but detached from any sense of familial warmth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's uncanny. The warmth does make it uncanny, like you said. It's I don't know. It's some it feels familiar. I can't quite place it, and I guess that's again part of the magic of it. It almost feels Stephen King-ish, like something being dredged up, like it's some baked-in imagery that we're all reacting to. I don't know.
There's something. This is jumping ahead. Well, yeah, in a way. So we have 2 episodes in this season which are Doctor-lite, like Ncuti Gatwa was barely in the episodes. We have this episode where he did 1 day of filming. And then the next episode, the Slug episode, which was also, at the start where he was busy with sex education. And I don't know how they filmed that, but apparently he's barely in it. Both these episodes have an interesting thing. I know Ncuti Gatwa has said, like, the ending of episode 5 is, this writer's going to be sticking around a long time. It's one of the best scenes of the series or whatever. Like, he's super proud of it. And episode 4, Russell told the radio back in 2023, I sat here and watched episode 4 last night, and I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever made in my life. So I'm very, very happy with it. It's really interesting that they're not just a different format for the show in terms of what they're doing. They're also like a break with the structure of the show because the main character, at least one of them, is barely in them. It's interesting that these are what the creatives are so proud of in a certain way. Do you think this is one of the best things Russell's made in his life?
Well,
I mean, Russell's made a lot of shit in his life, to be fair. Like, before when we were judging this question, it's important to keep perspective. But I don't think it's unfair, actually. I think you can easily put this up there, like with the greats of RTD. I don't think that's unfair at all.
Yeah. That's where I was coming in the start of this podcast with. It does seem like the Doctor-lite episodes always end up being something special, especially from the good writers. Working with limitations. We only have Ncuti for, a single day of filming, so let's just shoot one scene with him and then the rest is this nightmare. Best of RTD. I would have to put it up there. I can't rank it objectively right now, but I really, really enjoy this episode right now.
Very memorable.
Yeah, on the whole Doctor-lite thing, it's interesting to compare them to an episode like Boom, where Moffat deliberately sets himself a challenge. Like, this will just be the Doctor stood on a landmine in one set, like in one area for like 45 minutes. Or like Listen, where he's like, I'll prove I can still write, I'll do an experimental episode with no monster, blah, blah, blah. Versus these ones where, like, basically a quirk of scheduling and just like a forced circumstance, like the lead actor is not here, kind of forces the writer to go push the boat out and do something crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't landed on one side of that divide, or like one is better than the other. I mean, we don't have like a fair sample size really, but I do think RTD seems to be something let RTD off the leash, like here, like with set of circumstances. I love that it's the companion getting the focus here, because it's almost like when you just have the companion who has to like carry the whole episode rather than the Doctor. That's different in a whole new way, because the Doctor carries episodes anyway. So like a companion-like episode where Ruby dies halfway through doesn't feel that different. Whereas an episode that's all about Ruby is kind of taking the show to a different stratosphere. And you just have a larger range, I guess, really, of emotions you can go through, because, a companion doesn't have as much life experience as the Doctor. They're going to be like so much more like broken and shattered and uplifted by all kinds of things they can experience. So I really hope this isn't the last kind of companion-focused thing we get from RTD, like this era, because it's just such a whole wonderful world that he's opened up here. Like, I don't want to leave it.
Oh, I'm sure they're gonna have Ncuti fall down a hole next season.
I mean, we've got the toy maker and stuff in. Like, just have him turn invisible again. Just have Ncuti be a disembodied hand like last time.
Russell I know we've talked about how great it is, how open the episode is, and you can read so many things into it. Russell was kind of... He said something in the behind the scenes. He said, something profane has happened with the disturbance of this fairy circle. There's been a lack of respect. The Doctor is normally very respectful of alien life forms and cultures, but now he's just walked through something very powerful and something's gone wrong. But this something is corrected when Ruby has to spend a life of penitence, in which she does something good, which brings the whole thing full circle. It forgives them in the end. Thoughts on that?
I'd say that's about, I mean, that makes it a little more pat than I like, but that is sort of the vibe, you know? That she's cursed, and then she uses her curse to do a good deed that saves the world. And so the curse somehow repays her by fixing it. I don't know. It's...
I mean, RTE giving a glib little summary for the behind-the-scenes thing, I mean, that's one thing, but he knows what he's written here, because the style of it tells you that he knows. He knows he's written something, big and wild, that does not just simply... It doesn't explain itself and doesn't fit into one little box. So that's like one kind of broad read of it, and it's one kind of like broadly satisfying read of it, like, oh, it's penance and there's some karmic justice involved or whatever. But also, like, the episode is freakier and scarier than that. So it's you don't have to like treat RTD's word as God there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of is, it's an episode that doesn't so much defy description as it, although my attempt at recounting the plot might suggest otherwise. It's an episode that doesn't sound as good when described as it is to watch. Much like another great episode of RTD2, Wild Blue Yonder, which RTD, as I understand, famously refused to describe, not because there was some grand shock in it, but just because the Doctor and Donna land on a spaceship and there's shape changers that look like them. Well, that sounds like crap. That's, I mean, not crap, but that sounds, that's not much to describe.
Dull.
And here we have an episode where the Doctor and Ruby get cursed, and Ruby uses the curse to save the world. I guess that's a fair description.
I mean, and also, like, the ending being just, she dies and then her soul goes back in time to make sure none of it ever happened. Just the whole, like, go back in time to unwrite the events of the episode. I mean, that appears in so many stories that are kind of shitty.
Yeah.
So, like, even that, when you describe that, it sounds kind of shitty as well. Like, I kind of hate when stories do that, actually. We just have, oh, yeah, it's all been unwritten, and that's the catharsis of it all. We've just unwritten everything, and blah, 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 let's move on. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of development, but I think because ultimately it's the tone of the whole thing and the style of the whole thing that makes it, like, come alive, and that's the point of the exercise, really. I mean, it's the vibe, it's the feeling of the experience of actually going through this, like the places, the sensations. It's a sensory experience of TV. Like, it's not just like a prose exercise in kind of shuffling your themes around.
Mm.
And apparently it was a magic spell to dissolve the British government, as I understand.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of... See, I'm kind of at the point where actually that kind of, it's a magical sigil thing to dissolve the government. I almost feel like that feels too small for what an episode like this is doing at this point. Because it feels, it's kind of pat, isn't it? Like, especially in this case, considering, like, the current government has been toast for, like, years now, like, since Liz Truss, at least, right? So, like, oh my god, it was RTD's magic that brought it. No, dear. Maybe at the absolute most, maybe it kind of convinced, like, psychically warped Rishi Sunak into calling it in July rather than doing it in autumn. That's like the absolute maximum. Okay. So I just feel like there's just it's harder to kind of put into small little boxes like that. I don't have anything else to add on that point.
Yeah.
Speaking of governments, I guess that, this is a weird segue, but something that kind of sparked up in my head when we were talking earlier about, like, the Welsh castles and the nuclear weapons and everything like that. It's that, I was just thinking, RTD mentioned there in that little explanation that he gave about respect and how, like, respecting, like, the geography of the landscape, the traditions, the little rituals, the spells that people leave, the cultural artifacts, just respecting what people have left there, like, respecting the little unique magic of a specific place. I'm just wondering, like, could that connect at all to how we get this sense of Welshness described as characterized by violence? So maybe it is almost the fact that the history of this land is a history of violence and trauma and suffering and oppression it's kind of why it demands such respect, like why it can do this kind of thing to you if you kind of unthinkingly trample all over it. It's like, it's because this is actually a history of like power and oppression that this is something that it needs to be respected, because it's actually something that is very sensitive. Does that make any sense? Do you feel like there's a thread there at least?
Yeah.
The idea of a subjugated people having a secret magic that they have to fall back upon, and that years later that magic is brought against the the descendants of the conquering empire. That's, as an American, I'm very familiar with that story arc.
And that is kind of Stephen King, isn't it? I mean, like The Shining in the book, it's like built on a burial ground, and he loves that kind of stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
There's a random thing. I like complaining. I want to complain a bit. There's a random thing that really annoys me, not in the episode, but in the people talking around the episode. And people do it for episodes all the time, but people have been doing it so much for this one that it's making me gnash my teeth. Have you got? I know you guys have seen this. I'm being rhetorical here. When people are like, this episode would have been good if it had another 20 seconds of footage, or this episode would have been good if there was another 4 minutes, or this episode would have been good if it was an hour, or this episode would have been good. It's like, what? No, that's not a big... if this was a two-parter, then, and only then, would I like this episode. It's such a weird nothing state, because you're not... It's saying absolutely nothing. No, we had longer episodes before. It doesn't really... I don't really think it changes that much.
We had longer episodes under a worse showrunner. I think that's a valid criticism to make in general, but that's, at that point you're talking about editing, not about, the writing and direction of the episode. You're talking about feelings about the editing, and I've found the editing to be largely fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's moments like when Ruby goes out into the road outside the Welsh Inn, and the camera cuts from night to day, and the camera hasn't moved and the lady hasn't moved. That's a great moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of little kind of abrupt transitions like that. Like when she's on the train and we see the woman in all these locations, then we snap back to the house. So there's lots of moments. I think the sound design is involved there as well. There's a great sense of really being like yanking you from one to another, and match cuts like that one you described. There's lots of good bits like that.
I don't really see... I mean, more weird, shocking, horrible imagery maybe, but I don't really see that there's more. There doesn't feel like there's anything greatly missing from the episode.
Yeah.
Maybe more of Roger Gwilliam being creepy, but I feel like if you go too far into that, then you're going to inadvertently humanize him almost. You don't want him to be too real.
You can't really treat extra time as like a blank thing. I mean, it's like, an extra 15 minutes. I mean, of what? That could be anything, right? It's almost like, well, what is it you actually, what specifically do you think this needed more? And maybe some of that criticism maybe comes less from this episode, but maybe more about like the season project in general. Like maybe the Carla stuff doesn't work as well for some people because maybe you haven't had that much, I guess, familiar time with Ruby and Carla, maybe, or but also I think partly it is also coming out of the style the episode takes with, I guess, like we talked about with Gwilliam being this kind of thing you can project onto rather than a fleshed out thing. That kind of necessitates you don't spend too much time doing any one thing. The fact we go through that montage of Ruby getting older and older, and we don't spend like a long time at each age period kind of delving into one relationship or another relationship. The fact that they're sketched out and just kind of, I think what that's trying to do is trying to keep it on Ruby and her just kind of, I mean, she's distant from everything, right? She's distant from these relationships that she's going through. Like they aren't staying with her because she is so like preoccupied with the anomaly, like, with the woman. So it's doing this thing, it's being lyrical ultimately. And that is why you get these kind of sketched out moments and snapshots and characters rather than like a deeply, like a really tightly woven together, dense narrative. I mean, it's like a light year away from Moffat and Boom last week with all these, all these farcical like setups and like dialogue tangles going round and round. It's complete opposite of that.
That episode could use another 15 minutes.
Yes, that you make a good point. Yeah, quite possibly that could have done with it, and maybe because it's because it's that kind of episode that you could almost say that and it makes sense. Whereas this one is like the other kind of episode entirely.
I do have a few little problems with. Not so much problems. There's some things I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked... I feel like, given how the curse works, or whatever you want to call it, the woman, the follower. I feel like they could have done a few more camera tricks with it to have some fun with. I would love to have seen a moment like, some uncanny in-camera effects to sell the idea that no matter how fast or how far Ruby runs, she can't approach this woman or get any further away from her. The shot where Ruby runs down the road to try and chase after Carla, and then she turns the corner and we see the woman behind her. They could have easily put the woman behind her on, an extra dressed the same and doing the same motions at the other end, so that the woman seems to move, between roads in the middle of the same shot. Or they could have done that on the train too. Just little things. It's just how I would have liked things I would have liked to have seen. Not really complaints.
I kind of get why they didn't do what you describe. I think like that idea you had with the shot where you kind of see the woman in two places, that's a cool idea. But I think maybe the reason they didn't do that is because it's getting a bit too close to like seeing the weeping angels move. Like in a Flesh and Stone would do that. It's almost like if you engage with the logic of how she's doing it, that almost snaps the magic a little bit. It's the fact that it's a televisual trick, and we don't actually see her like just instantaneously like sliding from one position to another in sync with Ruby. The fact we only cut to her when she's already in place.
I'm not saying it has to be like in Flesh and Stone when the angels move. I was thinking more like when the angels move in blink just because someone passes in front of them, between them and the camera. But I get what you're saying.
The direction is very self-conscious and kind of, it's very deliberate in everything it does. So like the stillness of the woman and just like all the different little aspects. Like I think it's kind of a treat of a script to get as a director. So I'm glad we got like someone who's willing to kind of have some fun with it like that.
Yeah.
And kind of take it really seriously.
Yeah.
I have a thing. So something interesting. Ruby kind of ends up complicit in the abuse of Marty Bridges, doesn't she? Like a little bit. Like, would you agree with that? Because like,
yes, she does.
I mean, she gives her name to Roger Ap William, of course. And when it like I guess becomes clear that Roger is like abusing her, like Roger is a monster to her, kind of Ruby is still, I mean, however long later, once he's become Prime Minister, like when they're going onto the field, Ruby is kind of still part of that, like, posse or whatever. Because ultimately Ruby is so, because she has to, like, I guess insinuate herself with Roger and this whole gang in order to do her grand quest and, do her great magic trick to defeat the evil. She ends up kind of being party to that evil and kind of like that victimization. So, and I think that's to the episode, that makes the episode more interesting a bit, because you can kind of go after it for kind of like, why would you do that with Ruby? But like, I'm sure Ruby would have thought, oh, I'm a good person, I'd never do something like that. Oh, I would totally be the one to speak out. I would totally be the one to do that. So the fact that this kind of quest that she's on, like with the woman, like to save the world, kind of undermines that and says, well, no, actually, just by being in that environment, you are tainted too. Like, you are corrupted in that way, and that's kind of really bad for you. I think it just gives the episode a little bit more grit to it. It just gives that a little bit, another nugget of realness or like knottiness, which I appreciate. I think
it's somewhat redeemed by the fact that hearing that Marty's going to be like dragged into his inner circle or whatever. He's going to have her at the after party is sort of what drives Ruby to push her schedule up to, all right, we're just going to do this right now then. That redeems it a little bit, but I love the moral murkiness of it. I love there's something dare I say Lynchian about the way that conversation is shot with reverse shot of Ruby and the campaign manager guy whose name I didn't catch, and then third shot of dead center Marty looking mortified at all times. You see what I'm getting at there? There's a quality there that I can't quite put my finger on. A way that Lynch usually centers female suffering. That sounds weird. That sounds horrible. But You know what I mean?
I think it's accurate. If you've watched like Fire Walk with Me and stuff, I think it's accurate. That's a fair account. And Lynchian is such a meme word because people use it for like the most meaningless things. But there are lots of small actual things that Lynch actually does that you can kind of see like in little ways, kind of like almost like a Lynchian in a truer way than just like I'm doing a rip off of the Red Room scenes. Like actually, there are small things you can do to kind of be Lynchian in a truer sense.
Yeah. Nobody talks backwards in this episode.
No.
That scene where he asks if Marty's with them, when I first saw that, when you first watch it, it almost seems like he's acknowledging the following woman.
Yeah.
He says, "Is she with us too?" And that there's something there. I don't know. It helps again connect him in the vibe, in the image with the following woman, regardless of whatever their actual causal link or whatever is.
Yeah, the first time I watched the episode, I was kind of fairly convinced and I was fairly secure in my assumption that Gwilliam was part of the curse. And that in bringing the woman to Gwilliam, Ruby was closing some cosmic circle, and that was like Gwilliam was actually the Mad Jack spirit that had been unleashed from the circle, and Ruby had the great cosmic task to put him back in his box, like banish him using the follower woman, and that was what connected it all together. On second watch, I'm like, maybe Gwilliam is just a guy. Maybe this is actually just Ruby projecting everything, and maybe Gwilliam had nothing to do with it at all. Maybe it's a total coincidence that he was called Mad Jack. So all of that, it feels it could go either way, which I think is quite delightful. I do think ultimately I prefer him not being connected to it really, but I like that vein, that thin skin of maybe, kind of overlaid. Like maybe he is, because rather than it being one way or the other, like a binary, I like that.
Yeah,
it's just a slight the hovering doubt around it. I think is richer than knowing one way or the other.
It's possible. What I like about the episode is it's possible to read it as if somehow it all is just a dream she had about about the Doctor almost stepping on the fairy circle, because everything that the episode centers around comes from that one initial scene at the start. Like when Dorothy wakes up and says, "Well, you were there, and you were there, and you were there, and you were the Scarecrow." Everything that the rest of the episode is about is sort of presented in that first scene. So you could read it that way, or you could read it in like the most Doctor Who-ish way of the way that you might see it on first viewing. There's the ambiguity. I love it. I love how the episode it's teasing. It wants you to read into it. It wants you to think about it more. It's very good. I love it so much, and I'm really looking forward to them bringing back Roger Ap William as the Minister of War.
Yeah.
On topic of quibbles and wanting you to think about things, I loved when they did that thing that they also did in two of the previous episodes, where they play a flashback for something that happened like barely 20 minutes ago because they don't trust the audience to remember what just happened.
Oh my god. I hate it so much.
So when Roger Ap Williams says, "They called me Mad Jack," immediately they play a clip.
I forgot about that.
They play the clip. They play the whole ass clip of the Doctor describing who Roger Ap William is, and also Enid in the pub saying, "Mad Jack is unbound." That was such a clanging moment in an episode that is wonderfully full of subtlety and implication and letting you put the pieces together yourself. It's like, here's a flashback, guys. We're going to treat you like we have no respect for you whatsoever. Very, very jarring and strange.
I would say that's got to be a Disney note, but I've seen lots of RTD. He's always going to do some shit like that.
This episode is about absence in a lot of ways, isn't it? Well, Miraz and Gig are now absent as well. They're like the Doctor stepping into the trap. They're gone. Don't step, we tried to cry out, but it didn't work. But Dilb from the UK has emerged in their place, and we're going to talk through the music of the episode a bit now. Does that sound acceptable to you?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
The episodes this season with music I haven't cared about heaps are Rogue. Yes, Rogue's come out by the time we're recording this, and The Devil's Chord, where it was either the music was bad or the music was just kind of normal Murray orchestral. It's funny, those are the episodes that music's like the ostentatious thing, and I felt a little disengaged. But the music I really liked was Space Babies, Yards, and Dot and Bubble. I don't know if you felt the same.
No, yeah, I agree. When it's a bit more in your face, I suppose. I guess that's in sort of new territory.
In 73 Yards, like about a minute into the episode when they're on the cliffs, this is the first bit of music we get, and this is like kind of the main bit of music throughout the episode. Let's have a listen.
Spooky. Those sort of twinkly bits. Don't know if you remember, they sort of remind me of series 1. Like I'm conjuring images of like the Powell estate and I don't know, Slitheen and sort of that kind of intrigue and fear in the air in that series.
Yeah, I love how simple it is as well. It's just that little sliding down thing, but it sets you on edge a bit. It's really cool. Not long after, when the Doctor disappears and we first look over at the old woman, we get this thing, which I really, really like.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the first appearance of that kind of motif that runs throughout the episode. That sort of rising, whining kind of the strings.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
I don't want to be like Boss Baby, Babby's first horror, but it reminds me so much of the score to Psycho, like that Bernard Herrmann old school, really, really old school horror.
Yes. Yeah.
Strings, really creepy stuff. The pizzicato strings and everything. It feels like an actual old horror movie. I really, really, really like that.
I mean, you say it's, Babby's first horror, but it probably is kind of trying to evoke that kind of thing, like,
yeah.
Like I wouldn't put it past Murray,
This is a Boss Baby situation, but did the ending of that remind you of the Doctor Who theme? Like the do-wee-oo?
I suppose so, yeah, like a twisted, creepy version. Like this is a sort of twisted, creepy version of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Without the Doctor.
But that actually leads perfectly onto the next bit of music, about 5 minutes in, which is the Susan Twist scene, which is on the Devil's Cord thing, I was like having a sob and a tantrum about how much I hate the Susan Twist stuff this season. But I actually liked this scene. I thought this was a good scene, and the music was great. A lot of this, like, if we ever get a soundtrack, we won't. We should just accept it. But let's pretend. If we ever were to get a soundtrack, like, there's a lot of stuff we're hearing which wouldn't be in there because it's like the atmospheric sounds, but I feel like it adds so much to the music.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. Like, or even the bass tweeting and the whooshing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it wouldn't be on. I'm sure it wouldn't be on the soundtrack.
The whispering is like musical. Like the whispering when the old Ruby starts talking to Susan Twist. Like how Missy's theme is, like whispering and all that. I'm sure that would be there. But I feel like the waves and everything it really adds a lot. It's a really pleasant experience to watch these episodes without dialogue. No offense, Russell.
No, it's nice to get a chance to actually like listen to like just the score on its own, because I think it's been quite subtle, this series, a lot of the time. And I feel like without, a soundtrack release, which we're obviously not getting, I think, it's been a bit, I've not had much time to get acquainted with the new score yet,
Yeah. I know Classic Who, at least on the collection releases, I know they sometimes do like the score only, like watch the episode and we've actually mixed it properly, so it's not just cutting out the dialogue channel, it's actually meant to be just watch it with the score. I'd love it. I don't think New Who would ever do it, but it'd be pretty cool if they did. I'm going to keep doing this. After this season's done, I'm going to start going back, I think, and watching old Murray episodes, cutting out the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because it's been really interesting. I feel like I'm picking up so much more than I usually would.
It's a cool idea, yeah.
Maybe I should do it with Sagan too. This is a little bit of music. So that was after Ruby walks down and we start seeing the actual pub. I love how actually dark it looks there. Great location shooting. The sounds when Ruby is walking towards pub.
Yeah, again, it's like those strings and sound effects.
It reminds me of, in The Devil's Chord, Maestro's whole like evil scheme was, I just want the music of the land, the Aeolian tones. I just want the music of the wind to, reign free. And I really like that there's bits of this episode where I feel like that's actually kind of what the music is. It's Murray basically just like playing around with the wind or whatever. It's really cool.
It's cool. It's just like a mood piece.
Yeah. About 14 minutes in, when all the Welsh people are milking the Mad Jack story, we get this bit of music, which is, it's Murray's license to ham it up, I guess, since that's the whole point of the scene.
I love the vocalizations, like halfway through that clip, with the sort of low bassy like vibration. I don't quite know what that is.
Russell's talked about how it's like kind of a feint, like this switch from horror into something else with the episode. I feel like that scene without music, it might even look silly, like the Dutch angles and it's playing it so straight.
Yeah.
But the music just helps that you all feel like this is the actual texture of what we're dealing with. This really is a horror. It works so well. And then the comedy bit at the end where it like cuts out and it's just that dude with the meat or whatever.
Yeah, you can feel the tension being relieved, like even at the end of that music.
The next little bit of music is when the pub owner's having a go at her for driving Josh away, and when she's like resolving to, I'm going to leave Wales.
interesting you had some of the vocals coming through there, the dialogue even, on a different channel, because in this scene it had a quite strange sound design. I guess because it's a little bit of a montage, I suppose. Yeah,
I guess it was moving around. I guess this is a sound design thing. And Ruby's like headspace, she's not really listening. It's like the dialogue's moving around what channel it's in. I think that's a bit more typical Murray, that music, because it's kind of it's a bit more grand, the strings, but I love how mournful it feels. And we got those great match cuts of Ruby almost looking to camera. Those looked really good in the season 1 trailer, I remember.
Yeah, it's telling a lot of story. Like, it's doing a lot of work considering...
Yeah, we're not that far in.
Yeah.
This next bit is when Ruby's like saying goodbye to the TARDIS. This is really pretty, this bit.
Yeah, again, very romantic. I mean, Murray's basically writing for a scene where Ruby's effectively been ghosted, or so she seems. We're meant to get the sense that it's like the end of this sort of little era for her, and now things are going to take a new turn.
When she's on the train, which so much of the Unleashed episode was just about the train, wasn't it? I mean, it's better than being about other things, but the intricacies of filming that train sequence, the music's really nice on the train. It's kind of a new kind of thing, because I guess we're, like you're saying, we're leaving that era.
Spooky again.
I like that we didn't just play the regular like yards bit when she was seeing the woman out the window. I like that it was like kind of a subtler thing, which I know is hard for Murray. About 20 minutes in, when we get Carla leaving Ruby after Carla talks to the woman, we kind of get some new instrumentation and textures here. It's pretty cool.
Love those vocals towards the end.
The growling synths at the end I thought was mad. That was awesome.
Yeah.
It feels so off kilter and uncanny.
Almost feels futuristic, like we're heading into this sort of dark future, I suppose.
And yeah, like you said, the little percussion bits, I think it's the scariest scene in the episode, really. It's just, yeah, so well done. And again, I think the visuals are kind of, if you mute the episode, it looks sort of silly, like Carla just staring from like the cab as like she goes past. But the music really helps us actually feel this is wrong and awful.
Yeah, because it is, one of the most terrifying things that could happen to someone, especially Ruby.
Yeah,
being abandoned and rejected by the person who's closest to you in your life.
When Ruby's protesting, like, but I'm your daughter, and Carla's like, are you this you? This is the little bit of music there.
Oh, one thing I was really excited for if you remember when Murray debuted 2 new themes at the proms last year.
Yeah.
One was 15 and the other was Ruby's theme. I was just thinking, we're going to get so many fun little variations on this, and this is basically exactly what I wanted,
Yeah. I love that it's, because we know the theme pretty well by now. I mean, it got very directly explained to us in Devil's Chord. When we're doing like a subtle version of it, or we're kind of not properly doing it, I like that we can kind of feel that because we know it so well at this point. There was stuff in Sagan's era where I actually really liked the music, but I felt like we hadn't quite been taught the themes enough to kind of sometimes get that Sagan was doing something cool with them. But I like, this is so ostentatious, this show now, that we know, or we can kind of feel when something's being done with them.
Yeah. I mean, you can argue for the subtlety, but this is a big show, and like big emotions or whatever. And yeah, you kind of have to teach people this stuff because I don't know, I just thought it was really effective. Like as soon as I heard that piano, I associated that with Ruby. Yeah. Like I just instantly recognized that as part of the theme. I don't know how far it really goes, like if you're just watching on your phone or something. Because like sometimes I might watch like a reaction video and it might play some like chords from the Cyberman theme. And I think, you meant to think, oh, it's the Cybermen, but some people might not cotton on even with the theme. It definitely rewards like paying just a little bit more attention,
Even, I know it was the Moffat era where we had in Dark Water, the music is kind of telling you, hey, this episode's got the Cybermen in it. We're kind of giving you the reveal before the actual plot beat. But I feel like Moff era Murray was kind of, I actually kind of prefer how he was used. But he was used in a more restrained way, I think. Whereas in the Russell era, he's used so loudly. I remember Murray making a comment last year about Russell really knows what he likes and asks for what he likes. But like you're saying, it works for the audience to be used in that kind of way. Speaking of being big and brash, about 26 minutes in, when we're having the Unit thing and Unit are starting to move in on the woman, we get this bit of music, which is pretty cool.
I'm trying to think now, would Murray have done this in any of the previous eras, this kind of thing with the sort of juddery percussion there? It sounds quite atmospheric, but also has this militaristic edge to it, I suppose.
I like it. It's like the science versus magic stuff. It starts off,
we're
not getting a full-throated Unit theme, but it's like that kind of vibe. And then when the woman's like whispers come in, it just kind of breaks apart, and we get like little glitchy noises at the end. It's nice storytelling. A lot of this era, I've been like, where are our big renditions of old themes? And like sometimes we get them, but they're like in subtle ways. Like it's easy to miss the few times we've gotten all the strange creatures. But I like that doing like a big happy Unit theme there wouldn't have really made sense for what's going on where Unit fails as well. So yeah.
No.
I think maybe actually the most iconic bit of music in the episode comes from this next bit. It starts off with Murray and then it moves into like a licensed song where Unit just leave Ruby, and so we start moving into the montage of her living her life.
So that's very new territory for this episode. you hadn't really had anything quite so optimistic sounding. This I don't know. It's not like an actual song.
No, it's a real song. It's called "Watch Me."
Okay, because I was thinking it had this like sort of 90s soft rock Britpop kind of vibe to it.
It really fits in because I think the guitar in it sounds very Murray, like that kind of acoustic guitar.
Yes,
is his kind of thing. So it just feels like it fits into the texture.
It fooled me. Yeah,
like you're saying, it's like a total reframing of like, because this is all set to Ruby looking at the old woman. We've totally shifted vibes as Ruby shifted vibes and how she feels about her. Like the music is switched from the horror-y thing into like licensed pop. It's really interesting.
Comes after the point because Unit is the point where literally there is no hope left. I mean, the soundtrack never had any hope in it until this point. Like even in the Unit scene, there was some hope. Oh, things are going to get better, but the soundtrack never reflected that, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, and I like how it was really epic Murray music when they left. And I like how there wasn't like a gap. It moved right into the pop song like seamlessly. I thought that was really cool. Ruby mindset stuff. Around 34 minutes in the campaign headquarters where Ruby's talking to Marty and then the campaign win and then we go onto the football stadium. This is the music there.
Got the return of that rising motif from the village earlier on. It's very creepy.
It's very ethereal.
Yeah.
I like how, like at the start of the episode, when we're getting those rising and descending things, they're often just kind of alone, but we've got this kind of progression underneath the string bit, and I think it makes it sound kind of heroic or propulsive. It sounds like we've got movement going on in this scene, like Ruby's got a purpose, we're actually going somewhere with it now.
She's weaponizing this sort of myth, I suppose.
Yeah.
And there's vocals. I was trying so hard to think what they remind me of. I think it's the end of The Waters of Mars.
Oh yeah.
I think I've got no point to make about that. It seems it just struck me as similar.
This is when Ruby starts walking down onto the actual field.
It reminds me of Zimmer's Blade Runner 2049 score a little bit.
Yeah.
It's getting like sort of, I should say, more heroic towards the end. Like,
yeah. My ears might deceive me, but I feel like I'm hearing like a Jimmy Page, like the electric guitar like plays a note, then you like roll up the volume knob and makes it sound like it's swelling, kind of like a violin. I feel like I'm hearing that there in the swells. It sounds really cool.
Yeah.
The actual Murray thing I adore is when Ruby's on the field and everyone's going, put that down with her phone.
I love when Murray uses guitar in this sort of way.
Yeah.
It's definitely got more sort of frequent in the Capaldi era.
Yeah, that felt like a throwback to me, to older Murray. I really loved the guitar riff and the little throbby bass. That feels like Doctor Who to me.
Yeah.
When old Ruby talks to Gwilliam, this is pretty loud. Yeah.
Yeah, again, love when he uses vocals. Obviously, it's quite a sort of standard triumphant fare, but it's a nice spin on it, you know?
It's so, like, I don't think Murray would have done that or been asked to do that in Moffat's era.
It's very, yeah.
It's
purely Russell's taste, you know?
It's so I really like it, but it's so melodramatic. But I love the whole journey. The horror kind of swells, and then the sustained piano notes.
Yeah, you need this kind of big release of tension and relief, you know?
Yeah, the female choral thing, I associate that a lot with RTD1. So
yeah,
huge sense of victory. Ask her. Yeah, the female vocals, they really like that, don't they? And that feels like the ending of the episode, but it's not. When old Ruby revisits the TARDIS, we get this interesting little bit of music.
That's really lovely. It's like, it sort of reminds me of something you might do for Amy Pond. Like,
yeah,
this kind of discordant, sort of almost fairy tale-ish vibe it has.
I love how it's Ruby's theme, but it's not like a full-throated expression of it. It's like dancing around with it. I feel like I heard a little bit of it on the harp, or something that sounded like a harp in the background, and then it's like tinkling around with piano.
Yeah.
It's just this really beautiful, but kind of unfinished version of it. Really nice.
Yeah.
And then the male choir at the end and everything. It just feels so strong, and it just fits the storytelling so well.
Yeah. I think that reminded me of like the Smith era as well.
Yeah. When old Ruby is having her meme moment, like I used to that's nice, dear, in the hospital, we got a kind of similar thing where it's not similar because I feel like it's actually, let's just listen. It's a version of Ruby's theme.
So is that the first time we actually hear like her classic piano melody in full in this episode?
Yeah, the first and only, I'm pretty sure.
It's interesting with the heart rate monitor in the background.
Yeah. I love how, I don't know if this is a different arrangement or recording or if this is a use of Ruby's theme earlier in the season. I assume it's new. But the way the tempo actually changes a little bit, like the pianist slows down and speeds up, it feels so, it's like an actual expression of a life. It feels very human.
Yeah, and I noticed that kind of ebb and flow it had. It's interesting.
And I like that it's at pretty much her deathbed. Well, yeah, her literal deathbed, that we finally get her actual theme full on. It's like, and she's kind of accepting, what's happened with her life at the end. Yeah, it all works really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally called The Life of Ruby Sunday, isn't it? Life of Sunday, that's it.
The Life of Sunday, I think. But the titles are, like the 15s theme, like you said, it was called 15th at first in the BBC release, and then I feel like no one's called it that since, so I don't know what's going on with the titles, and we'll never get a soundtrack to clarify.
If only we had an official release with actual track names, so we can just, I mean, for years we had Breaking the Wall.
Yeah.
Turns out it was the Shepherd's Boy, which I prefer.
When we talk Dot and Bubble, there's a thing about this I want to talk about where I feel like fans are naming the bits of music, and they have to because no one else is going to do it. But anyway, the little jump scare, like at the start we were talking Psycho and Bernard Herrmann and that sort of music, but then when we get our this isn't an A24 movie, we've got damn jump scares with old Ruby, looking at old Ruby, this is the music.
I noticed some like stock sound effects in there, like that sort of, I don't know what it is, this like sort of striking metal kind of thing that you might hear in like to punctuate lines in trailers.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just, it's to create this sort of horror movie kind of effect, I guess.
I love the sound effect music blending stuff. Yeah, it's so, I don't know if this is like we said earlier, I don't think this would be a soundtrack thing, but it's just a cool way to experience the episodes. I love the descending groaning thing. Just feels like absolute death to me. It's really cool.
Yeah.
The two last bits of music in the episode are probably my favorite bits of music in the episode because it's got the guitar that we love. So this is when we move into the point of view shots and we've like looped back around and it's old Ruby looking at young Ruby.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's my favorite musical moment.
Yeah.
That's the part with like that sort of POV shot of her arms in front of the camera, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting scene.
I think, are we getting the electric guitar associated with Ruby triumphing, Ruby succeeding? Because it played in the stadium as well when she was succeeding there.
Yeah.
That's an interesting instrument for her.
And that sort of soft rock song, which
yeah.
I didn't know was licensed, but it sort of matches that as well, even though this, I'm assuming, is like a Murray Gold original.
Yeah. I like how it starts off like the picked bits of the electric guitar, but then when we go into the strumming, the actual strings come in. I feel like everything's being reframed in a very comforting way. It feels like death. It feels like a heavenly kind of bit of music, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say like an afterlife, yeah.
Yeah. And to continue right on from that, because we heard her say don't step at the end, this is the bit of music that closes the episode.
That crescendo towards the end and the sudden sort of silence.
Yeah. It's interesting. We get a lot of textures in the episode. Like we moved from the guitar there into the female choral sort of thing. We had the piano interspersed, the wind, then the horns. I feel like the horns almost felt like they were suggesting Ruby's theme to me without actually doing it. But they might just be, I don't know if there's anything to that. I really like the tone of that though. There was a little bit of mournful quality to it, but mostly like the big triumph of timeline averted.
Yeah. That's why it's so nice to just go through with the isolated score and just really luxuriate in it, because I didn't, even though I loved the episode and loved the score, I didn't really have as much of a sense of just how much went into the score, how like the varied influences and styles and things.
Yeah. I think it's a money thing as well. Like I know Sagan my assumption was he had less to work with money-wise, and that's why so much of it was synth-based. And when he got orchestra, he seemed super... I remember he was so excited with Spyfall when he got an actual orchestra for some episodes. But I feel like Murray is given a lot from the show, and so he has a lot of room to play around. And that's so much original scoring across this episode, totally. And it's just such an odyssey.
Probably a lot more time as well.
Yeah. Well, you'd hope so, yeah.
You'd hope so. It's never a guarantee.
I love the episode on its own terms, but just musically, like I love a regular Murray episode, even if it's just the kind of dramatic string arrangements. I still like that, but I feel like it's not as interesting to listen to or talk about. But here we had so many different approaches, the horror approach, the licensed approach, the guitar stuff. It just felt so memorable and like such an actual journey to me. Really, really, really good stuff. Yeah,
definitely. An episode like this, you want like a sort of singular kind of score that doesn't quite sound like any other episode.
Yeah. I would love, if giving up on the soundtracks is fine, but the proms still happen. I know you're probably going to boycott them now to avoid there's always a twist at the end, live performances, but I would love like a 3-yard suite. I think that would be really cool to listen to.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love it. Yeah, I can picture it now with the clips on the screen and sort of journey, like reliving that Ruby's journey. It would be nice. But yeah, if a choir comes out and they look like they're about to sing any 60s influenced songs, I'm gonna skedaddle out of there.
In timey-wimey fashion, I hate saying that. Do I really need a preface for that? No, I don't. This little bit has been recorded later than the main bit. When Gig and Mirrors and I talked that main discussion about 73 Yards, it was a few days after 73 Yards aired, and therefore it was before Dot and Bubble aired. Now Dot and Bubble has aired, and a few other episodes as well, and there's an issue of Doctor Who magazine 605, which has a few 73 Yards things in it that I just couldn't let this recording release without including. So Gig and I are going to quickly scatter through those. How does that sound?
Sure, sounds cool.
Okay. RTD comments in the magazine. This is from like a behind the scenes look at 73 yards. In one of the sections in this article, Russell says, I love a Doctor-lite episode, but let's face it, if Ncuti had been available, we would never have done a Doctor-lite episode in season 1. Casting Ncuti meant casting him before he'd finished on sex education. That was a risk that we took, but it was absolutely the right risk because it meant we got the best possible Doctor in 2024 that we could wish for. So he just explicitly stating like Dot and Bubble and 73 yards wouldn't have happened if Ncuti hadn't had to finish sex ed.
Yeah, like on one hand, that's completely understandable. On the other hand, I feel like the fact that in this quite condensed 8-episode season that's kind of doing a lot of, I don't know, despite sort of claiming to be experimental, it kind of does a lot of sort of trad things or kind of safe things. The fact that I feel very lucky that we got this experimental stretch at all, to be honest. And obviously, as we see here, it is basically luck. You know, it was basically a coincidence of Ncuti's schedule that they had to deal with, like a limitation that was imposed on them. And, you know, often the limitations that get imposed are when some of the most interesting Doctor Who things happen. So yeah, I'm glad this happened, even though it wasn't necessarily part of their intended ideal structure.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. He ends that little section saying, the marvellous thing was, I'd had this idea kicking around for ages of the Doctor and his companion stepping outside the TARDIS and seeing someone in the distance, but I could never make it work with 2 people. So when it became Doctor-lite, when it was just Ruby and we were able to follow her whole life, it sort of freed itself. Also, I thought there was a nice balance pairing it with Boom, which is such a character piece for the Doctor. That ended up dictating the shape of the series. Doctor-heavy episode, followed by a Ruby-heavy episode.
See that nice symmetry of having it paired with Boom, and the fact that that structural thing was, again, you know, a consequence of, I guess, an accident, really, of scheduling or something they couldn't really get around. I kind of wish that episode structure, things like that, parallels, just like wider things extending beyond one episode. It would have been nice if there was more of that in the season. I think in general that's a quite good thing. You know, it reminds me a little bit of almost with what they did in Series 9 with the paired episodes that aren't necessarily 2-parters exactly. That was really cool. I think stuff like that is really, really interesting. Obviously it's harder to do if you only have 8 episodes, but still. And as for the RTD's thing about how this episode would never have worked with like 2 characters with the Doctor, he's completely right. he's completely right. So I think taking the Doctor away for this episode is like really crucial, and I think it really has to be a companion thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's like the Doctor with something like this, it just doesn't quite work. I mean, he sees so many things. He's so, you know, he's so experienced and also open to experiences in a way that companions often aren't yet. So it just wouldn't have the same effect.
Yeah, I agree. On the ambiguity of the episode, Russell says, what is following Ruby? It's not quite as simple as it looks. It's worth noting that old Ruby and the woman following Ruby are played by 2 different actors, so it's not quite as simple as saying it's old Ruby following herself. It becomes that at the end, but that's not what's happening beforehand. I'm absolutely deliberately throwing this out to the audience because we know it will be discussed as part of the Doctor Who discourse for the next 30 years. Russell suggests it's anxiety, it's death, it's mortality, it's your mother, it's work, it's the people you've lost, it's everything.
I like him acknowledging the difference in the actors. I would say that because the woman is so far away, you have to look really, really closely to like really sort of make that matter at all. I mean, my assumption before that quote was that you were kind of just meant to ignore that the actors were different, just kind of meld them together. Like, okay, like, so old Ruby's hair is a bit different, or face shape is a bit different. Like, who cares, right? They clearly represent the same thing. But for him to actually use that and say, actually, this makes it more complicated, the difference between the 2 actors. So maybe there is even vaster, more inscrutable thing going on. I think that's really nice. So yeah, just like the fact that there are more little rabbit holes in this episode than maybe there even initially appear. Like, it's actually, you know, the things that you might instinctively suppress or like collapse together. Okay, just ignore that the actor's different. Actually, that's a point at which you could blow it up into something even more. Yeah, that's a acknowledged, like, conscious thing. That there could be more in that rather than something you have to cut out for it to make it work.
Yeah, that whole section felt like it was pushing against direct allegories as we kind of went into with mirrors. So I really liked him kind of opening things up there more. The last thing I have from Russell in the magazine is there's a little section in the article which directly pulls on years and years talking about similarities between Emma Thompson's character and Roger Ap Gwilliam. So talking about Russell writing these sorts of characters, these sorts of dystopias, Russell says, It's on my mind every waking hour. Also, ever since I've been writing Doctor Who since 2005, I can't help putting a Prime Minister in every year and toppling one every year. But it's simply how I write. I believe in bringing Doctor Who back to the real world. And when you do that, you have to put the real world into Doctor Who. To be honest, the Roger Ap Williams storyline is a bit of a sketch. The episode is really about the passage of life. It's about seeing an entire life pass in duty, in dedication to doing the right thing. In waiting, Ruby turns out to be such a good woman with such patience. We're all waiting, aren't we, for some reward at the end of it, for some gift once we're done. And I'm telling you, it's not there. But maybe once in a while a story like this comes along where someone gets thanked for being a good person. I
would question the extent of thankedness in this story. I mean, earlier in that behind the scenes, he described it as a life of penance Ruby's having to do, and I guess like I mean, her reward ultimately is like negating all of it, and having the regular Ruby continue the life before she stepped on the thing or unleashed the curse or whatever. So yeah, and I think again, as much as he's pushing back against nice, tidy allegories and stuff, I do think occasionally when it's like, well, this is to make Ruby feel like this, or this is to thank Ruby. Ultimately, I think that's kind of another form of the compressing. So,
yeah.
But the good thing is he gives you more than one option ultimately, because like I said, he seems to be saying different things in the magazine or in behind the scenes. So ultimately, that just reflects the fact that it's not just one thing.
Yeah, I liked him outright saying that it's kind of a sketch, the Roger Ap Williams stuff. It's not really the point of the episode, which we got anyway. But yeah,
yeah.
And that wraps us up for good on 73 Yards. Let us know your thoughts on this very interesting episode. Your thoughts on our thoughts, my thoughts, Mira's thoughts, Gig's thoughts, Dilb's thoughts, thoughts on the music, thoughts on anything in the episode at all. Such an interesting episode. Actually really keen to read comments and see what other people think of this one. So yeah, let us know. Thanks for listening.